I'm just kidding.
Mon Dieu, le repas de ce soir.
She already sent to me. Okay, good.
Okay, now I think it's calmed down a little bit. This is so fabulous. Hi guys.
Walls.
Oh yeah, we're inside, so it's not as.
Allez, les croisés avec le croisé. Et puis tous avec le Télétubbies, C'est là, c'est lequel le Télétubbies?
Attention, madame
Faut tourner sur soi-même. Allez, tous aux toilettes.
We need some more few people.
Alors, vous pouvez envoyer. On a dit. On va voir, on a l'air en train de.
Ah, very good. Is it the first time you're visiting Switzerland? Okay, so I have to be good. All right, now please follow me this way.
Yeah, I think we can just give up on the hair at this point. It's done.
Let's go here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please come a bit closer. I won't bite you. Welcome to the castle of Chillon. My name is Samuel and I'm glad to be your guide. As I said it already, but I can see you are very thirsty, you want to have a drink. But what I want to show you is this castle all around, because you are very lucky. You can have a drink in the largest castle of Switzerland, the castle of Chillon. And this castle is like an old man or an old lady of 1,000 years old. So please treat it very kindly. You're the ladies and lords of the castle, but treat it very kindly. You know, it was built 1,000 years ago by the Counts of Savoy. Nowadays, Savoy is a French region on the other side of Lake Geneva, but in the Middle Ages it was bigger and it was like an independent state, and it went from Switzerland to the Mediterranean Sea. And when that castle was built, you can see that it was divided in two main parts. On the mountainside there was a fortress, and that fortress was very important because just in front of the castle there was a road that went from France to Italy. It was a very important commercial road. And on the lakeside there was the residence where the people were living. And you maybe saw three courtyards. The first one is where we met. The second one was on the other side of this tower, and this was the first one. And this courtyard was the VIP courtyard because it was only opened when the Counts of Savoy came here. You know, like many other noble families in the Middle Ages in Western Europe, they didn't have a capital city, and to rule their lands they traveled all the year long from a castle to another. And they got something like 15 or 20 castles, so they were traveling a lot. But they stood there only 2 or 3 weeks per year. That's all. Now, enough wind. Let's go inside.
Thank you.
I should have brought my sign. This is a good place to take a picture.
See, that's why I said, well, they got hot dogs. Don't fall in heels. Hey guys.
I know.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yes. Oh yes, but on the other side of the castle. You just have to go downstairs and go straight. All right. This way. Okay. This room is not the largest one of the castle, but it was the most important one because it was the bedroom of the Counts of Savoy. When the Counts came here, they lived in that room. We are far from the entrance. It was very safe. If the castle was attacked, the Counts could use that stair to go to the keep, the highest tower in the middle of the castle, to be safe. And you know, in the past, the bedroom was not only a place where you slept, it was also a room where you received your guests and friends. So it was designed to impress the visitors. That's why you can see wall paintings all around, and that's why the ceiling looks different. Both the paintings and the ceiling date from the 14th century. They're 700 years old. If you look to the paintings, you see that there's the sky, then the trees, then the animals, then the ground. It's a kind of perfect nature, like paradise. And you can see a lot of blue. Today, the blue is a very common color. But in the past, it was named the color of kings, because it was made with the precious stone lapis lazuli that came from Afghanistan and costed a lot. To produce it, you had to crush the stone and mix it with oil or eggs or milk. They used eggs and milk to paint in the past. So by putting blue everywhere, the Counts were saying, we are rich, we are the masters, blah, blah, blah. And you can also see lily flowers on the blue color. We know the lilies as the symbol of France in the past, but as I said, Savoy was not part of France at all. At the beginning, the lilies had a Catholic meaning. They symbolized the Virgin Mary because it's the flower of purity. And you can also see lilies on the blue part of the ceiling. But those lilies here up were covered with gold painting. And the crosses on the red part were covered with a silver painting. It was very shiny because it was a place of power. And you can recognize realistic animals quite easily. For instance, there's a deer, 2 bears, a leopard, a beef, a lion and a lioness, even a dromedary. But there's also fantastic beasts, because in front of me there are on the right a dragon, the symbol of the devil, and on the left a griffin, the symbol of Jesus Christ. A griffin is a lion with wings and the head of an eagle. And if you look above the fireplace, it's very hard to see because it's dark now, but here on this model you can see it quite well. You can see a representation, a painting of Saint George slaying the beast. Who's English? Saint George is known as the patron saint of England, but he was also the patron saint of Savoy. In fact, he was the patron saint of a lot of countries, mostly in Eastern Europe, because he was the most popular saint in the Middle Ages. He was the patron saint of knights. That was pretty cool. In fact, he's the medieval superhero. Now let's go a bit further.
for very tall people.
In French, we call that room the throne chamber. We're in the medieval toilets. It's the same word in French or in English, which is practically the latrines, the medieval toilets. You know, here, the toilets were built on the lakeside for two reasons. It was cleaner, everything was dropped straight to the water. In the Middle Ages, the level of the lake was a bit higher, 1 or 2 meters higher, so they could see the water at that time. And the toilets were also built on the lakeside for safety reasons. You know, some European castles were taken by enemies climbing by the toilets. And here, the lake is very, very deep. 100 meters deep straight, so around 300 feet. It was impossible to climb here. It was too dangerous. And you can see that there are 2 holes. Why? Why the hell are 2 holes in these toilets? You know, today the toilets are a very private room, but in the past things were different. The toilets were a very social room. You know, first the people ate a lot of bread and a lot of meat, so they took their time to do their own private business. And in the toilets they were quiet. They could speak. There was no servants. So, you know, today the politicians speak in the lifts. In the Middle Ages they spoke in the toilets. Things were different. And I have a very important questions for you. What did they use as paper? What do you think?
Leaves.
Yes, not the hand, but huge leaves. Oh. And here, you know, when you think that your life is not good, when you're depressed, think about, you know, there was a job in the Middle Ages, the guy who was in charge to clean the toilets. Literally, if I translate the French word into English, it's the shit guy. But it was very well paid.
That video? We go downstairs.
Yes.
Whoop, can't bump the head.
And there you can go to the next courtyard. This way, please.
This way.
Yes. Thank you.
Nice. Nice. I'm surprised my internet is working like it is. It doesn't work this well at my house.
Where's that? Hoover, where are you? That's where are you?
Trustfield.
Trustfield.
You've been to my house before?
Yeah, that was long.
Oh my, look at this. You can see the water through this little hole right here. Oh, that is so cool. Did you take a picture of it? Did you take a picture of it? That's a cool spot to sit in and sit here and watch the water. That is the cool, look at that. You can see the water taking here. That's a cool spot. You can watch everything right there. You can sit there and look. That's so cool.
Sorry.
Sorry.
How long you been giving this tour?
Oh God.
This place is like a maze.
So, come this way, please. Here I need you to use your imagination. Because in the past, when the castle was built, there was no courtyard here. There was a roof upon us, and you can see where a floor was and where a door was. All of this part of the castle was a kind of workshop. But in the 16th century, 500 years ago, there was a little earthquake in the region. It's quite rare, but sometimes it happens. And all this part of the castle was tumbling down and never rebuilt. Instead, it was transformed into a kind of little fortress to watch over the town of Montreux. And in a way, the people of the past did well, because now we have a view on the beautiful medieval highway. Now let's go to the chapel, please. To the left. And watch your head.
To the left, to the left. But the connection is so great. You think these walls is like a connection?
You know, we are now in the St. George Chapel, the private chapel of the Counts of Savoy. Only them and their wives came here to hear the Mass in the Middle Ages. This chapel was dedicated to St. George, that's why you can see a statue of him right here. And the building, this chapel was built in the 13th century, but the paintings date from the 14th century. And I always use the word paintings during the visit, but here on the ceiling of the chapel, and on the ceiling only, there are not paintings but frescoes. Paintings mainly in the cement when it was still fresh, from the Italian affresco. And I could say a lot about all these paintings, because their story is both interesting and complicated at the same time, but I just want to show you two elements, if you don't mind. It's quite dark because you can see it. Here, there is a man who stands like this. And this position is typical from the English paintings of the 14th century. So among the artists who painted that ceiling, some were English or traveled to England, they knew the English paintings. And there you can see a tower. It's a representation of the heavenly Jerusalem, the Christian paradise. But this tower is based on a real one located in the city of Milano in Italy. So among the people who painted that ceiling, some were Italian or knew Milano. So on the same ceiling you have both Italy and England. In the Middle Ages the artists traveled a lot. But after the Middle Ages, this chapel was used to stock gunpowder and cannonballs. Fortunately, it never exploded, and in the 19th century, the restorers tried to recover the medieval paintings that were, because you know, in the early modern, all the walls were whitewashed, and in the 19th century, the archaeologists tried to recover the medieval paintings, but as you can see, some were damaged, because to do that in the 19th century, they used a type of acid. It's not very good. We don't do that anymore nowadays, fortunately. Now, enough chapel, let's go outside, and I want to show you the prison.
Yeah, the courtyard. I think it had to be a prison.
We have strong service over here. I mean, I mean, no problem.
They can make everybody know nails like that. Everybody on themselves, they not using it.
I would get lost in this place. I wouldn't know which way to go if I.
They got a number, but you got to turn it around.
Wow. Wow.
I may have missed this, or you might have said, how long does it take to build? Just
More than 4 centuries.
really?
Yeah. You know, to build a little castle, it took 30, 40 years. And you know, then you had to increase the size and again and again and again. Yeah, so it took centuries to do that. So now we are in the fortress, the military part of the castle. That's why the architecture is completely different. You can see defensive towers, you can see a sentry walk, and behind me there's a kind of moat. But in fact it was not a moat, and sorry for you, there's no English words to describe it. You know, normally English is a more precise language than French for quite everything except cooking and medieval architecture. Because you know, the French invented the castles, and when they invaded England, a lot of the English words used to describe the castles in fact came from the French. In English you can call that a ramp or a rampart. In French it's called a glacis. It was built all around the castle. And when that glacis was built, the wall on your right didn't exist, and the glacis went to the lake. No enemy could climb, they were shot if they tried to, and they couldn't dig under the walls to pull them apart. But when the second wall was built, the glacis became useless, so it was filled with stones and sand, and here for centuries it looked like a courtyard. Again, it's only in the 19th century that the archaeologists discovered it again, and that's why it's so well preserved, because for centuries it was hidden. So you learned the French word, glacis. Now let's go to the prison if you don't mind. Watch the step.
People were smaller back then. You were shorter. They are so not 6 inches. I could not wear 6 inches.
They think you.
I don't know what those are. What? Too high. Those are not too high.
Yes. We're now. We're going to the prison. I have to confess I lied a bit. Because you know, in the Middle Ages, this room and the next ones were used as storerooms. Everything here is 800 years old. The pillars, the votes, the Gothic votes, the wall, everything. And to build this castle, the workers used a type of sandstone. If you look to the walls, you see that the rocks are very porous. But to build the pillars, the votes, and the stones between the votes, they used tufa, that is more solid. But you know, this castle is named, the name of this castle is Chillon. It's in the old Celtic language, the word Chillon means rocky island, because the castle is built on a rocky island. And right now, you're walking on this rock. It's a type of rock called gneiss. It's very, very hard. It's even harder than granite. To destroy it, you have to use dynamite. In the past, they couldn't do that. That's why in a lot of rooms, you'll see that the walls are following the curves of the island. And in case you ask, this room was already a wine cellar in the Middle Ages, so we produce wine here. We stock barrels here since the 13th century. And there you can see that we produce mostly white wine. Please here be careful because the floor is not very smooth.
Oh, that's slippery.
I want to show you something that the visitors never notice. Please look to the keystones. You see that the votes are not straight anymore. Because I told you that 500 years ago there was an earthquake in the region and all the castle in a way at that time moved a bit. But the Gothic architecture is so strong that the votes were not destroyed by the earthquake. They just moved a bit. So if you look to the votes, none of them are aligned anymore, but there's no fissures. They were not broken. It's quite impressive. Do you know how the Gothic architecture works?
No.
It's very simple. Oh, please, sir, could you come here?
No, I don't.
I want to show to everybody how it works because it's very simple. Okay, please do like this, and you. This way. Okay, I do the same.
Okay.
That's how the Gothic architecture works. The pressure is here on the keystone. I told you that this room was used as a storeroom. And on the lake sign, you'll see several doors. Behind them, there's the lake. I told you that the lake here is very, very deep. Oh, please come closer. Another prisoners are escaping.
Thank you.
And in the past, ships could come here on the lake, and through those doors the servants brought, for instance, food and supplies inside the castle. It was not used to throw the prisoners into the lake. But you know, here, Lake Geneva is very dangerous because there's a lot of currents in the water, and unfortunately each year there's a lot of diving accidents. It's one of the most dangerous places of the lake. Oh my God. Now to the prison. You can come closer and nobody will die. See, and there's the lake. Okay, so I told you that all these buildings were made of stone. The visitors wanted to hear stories of death. So the guides told them horrible stories, but they were not true. This room was also a storeroom. You know, in the Middle Ages, the executions were always public, because it was like a social spectacle. Nowadays we go to theater, but in the past they went to the executions. It never happened inside the castle. Now the prison. Oh, again, please come closer. I won't speak too loud. No, it's not risky. It's just a little hole of 10 centimeters. Okay, we are now in the prison, the most famous place of the castle. When it was built, it looked a bit different. For instance, all the windows behind you were closed with bricks. There was no light. And near the entrance on your right, you can see these little walls that went higher, and it was a cell for the prisoners sentenced to death. That's why you can see a Christian drawing on the wall. It's not a painting, it's a drawing from the 15th century, so it's 600 years old. In a way, this cell was like a chapel for the prisoners. It was the last time they could pray God to forgive them before their execution. In average, we think that between 15 to 20 prisoners could stay there. The maximum we know was 250 people during a witch hunt. So imagine, how are you? 20, 25, even 30? Imagine 200 people there. That's so huge. In all the castles of Savoy, there was a prison like this, but this one is very special because of two men. The castle became very famous because of this prison, because of an English poet and a prisoner of Geneva. You know, 200 years ago, in 1816, the English poet Lord Byron came here to visit the castle. To be honest, nowadays, if English is not your mother language, is not that famous anymore. But 200 years ago, Byron was a kind of rock star. He was young, he was pretty, he was talented, and he was very scandalous. In 1816, he had to fly away from England because he had huge debts, and he also had an affair with his own half-sister. The problem was not the incest itself. A nobleman could do what he wanted, but he was a married man and his wife was richer than him, and she wanted to divorce. So he came to Switzerland in exile. It was the time of the Romanticism, and the Romantic writers, as Byron, loved the Swiss mountains. To them, the Alps were sublime, even beyond beauty itself. And at that time, the English created tourism in Switzerland, by the way. Thanks, England. And, you know, they also loved the Middle Ages, so Byron visited this place. And while he was there, he heard the story of a real Swiss prisoner, a man who stood there in prison 500 years ago. His name was François Bonivard. He's quite famous in Switzerland. And Byron heard the story of that man, and he wrote a poem about him, a poem called The Prisoner of Chillon. It's a very political poem about the freedom of conscience. And in the poem, the name of Bonnivard is never given. The prisoner is named the prisoner, so he can be the prisoner from everywhere. And when the poem was written, it was translated very quickly into 22 languages, because Byron was very famous. And then a lot of writers from all around the world came here to visit the castle of the poem, like a kind of pilgrimage. And all of them wrote about the castle in their own poems, letters, novels. So thanks to this poem, the castle of Chillon, that is just a castle like the others, became a castle of books, a castle of literature. And now if you look to the pillars, you see that there's a lot of graffitis on them. Some were made by the prisoners in the Middle Ages and are mostly at the bottom and are 600 or 700 years old. For instance, there you can see the coat of arms of a shoemaker. In the 19th century, the visitors wrote their names at the top of the pillars. It's the selfie picture of the 19th century. They wrote their names. There you can see there's a guy named Branson who wrote his name. We don't have a lot of Branson families in the region. Probably he was an English or an American visitor, I don't know. And here you can see the signature of Byron himself. To be honest, there's a controversy about it and we don't know if it's true or fake. If it's a fake, it's a very old one because it was discovered only 1 year after Byron's coming. So it's nearly okay. But I want to show you something we discovered 2 years ago, a real signature, because you know when Byron visited the castle, he was not alone. He traveled with another British poet, Percy Shelley, the husband of Mary Shelley, and we discovered Shelley's signature. But I need a cell phone. Oh, because I need some light. Oh, you can help me, it's very good. But here, you have to come close. Oh yeah, it's the perfect place. There is Shelley's signature. The S disappeared, but there's the H, the E, 2 L's, another E, and a very little Y. This is Shelley's signature. Why? Because he always wrote his name in capital letters, always. So I hope one day we'll put another window on this name, like Byron. But Shelley was less famous than Lord Byron. But I think he was a better poet. Now I set you free. Let's go outside and let's have a beverage.
I got caught onto you. Did you get a chance to see that? Oh, we did. That's pretty. Thought I was missing a step.
So there. No, you have to come down to the left. There you have a beverage.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have something to drink? No, you're welcome.
Hey, beautiful.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put the camera on. Oh, shoot.
Hi.
This is my sweetheart right here. orange juice?
Orange juice, yes. She's with Coca-Cola on the bottom, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Watch out for that. Alright, pop it outside. Where's Rachel? Where's my wife?
How are you? That's my twin. Her name is Debbie also. She's from the UK. Hi! How about every time I do it?
She's nobody.
Oh, everybody.
She's nobody. How you doing? Excuse me, I'm not follower.
Yay.
Nothing no one's gonna do. Just fries, please.
I need some more water.
Sorry, that was him. Sorry.
We should
It's
stand
so
on the
fun.
cheese table.
Oh, the cheese table. Yeah. Cheese and bacon. You should be here.
Yeah, this is like the best place in the world.
We are
Love
blessed.
it. We are. Our hair's red bone.
See, Lisa's over here eating some
Fried
cheese.
beef and cheese.
Oh, that's what she's eating.
Fried beef and cheese.
Oh, cool. It's asking me to tag you. Yeah, I'm full already, so I get mine for dinner. Hi, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the tour. It was fabulous. It was totally fabulous. I want you guys to not miss out on this. Love you guys. Bye.